Hiya, and welcome to another game creation video, and today we're going to be looking at the tile size and trying to be flexible with it and trying to figure out how we can pick the size of tile we want at a later point but still have something on screen. So with coding we want to be as flexible as we can be, because this is a kind of prototype. We're not quite sure. We arbitrarily picked the tile size before, but maybe we'll change our minds. Maybe we just need to see it at different sizes to kind of see what would work with our game. So it actually pays like dividends to be flexible at this point. And for instance, later on we might want to zoom into the map and maybe manipulate the size of the tiles. So there's all sorts of reasons why we don't want to necessarily commit ourselves to absolutely making sure that we do a 64 by 64 tile grid, or a 32 by 32, or a 16 by 16, or a 10 by 10 for instance. And so today's video is going to be about that. We're going to kind of learn about global variables and global values and stuff, and yeah, let's get started. So let's go to the screen. So I've opened up the file we started last week. We finally get to use this, and I've double click on the frame editor. This is something I plan never to ever use apart from in YouTube videos. I don't find the quick backdrop actually that useful. I think for some projects the beauty of it is that it loads really quickly and you don't have to put much effort into it, because you just draw whatever it is you want and it will just tile it beautifully, which is really good. It's not as powerful as an active, so that you can actually put loads of these in and it won't slow the game down. Actives actually, if you put too many of them, it can really have a performance hit on the game. So there are advantages, but I just don't find them that useful. I do everything with actives or pictures and stuff like that. Right, so I want to double click on this and I want to press Ctrl and A to highlight all of the picture and press Ctrl and C to copy it. And what I'm going to do is double click anywhere and I'm going to do it as, for now, an active. I just find active easier. I'm going to press Ctrl and A and Ctrl and V, and it will say, oh, that tile is bigger than the canvas is. Yeah, that's fine. I don't mind that. Okay, fine. And just big bing. Right. So I want to get rid of that tile grid now, because in this week's video we're going to actually get our own tiles, which will be really good. I want to make sure it's positioned precisely at 0, 0. Double click on it, make sure that the action point is at the top left. That's where I'm used to it being. And then 0, 0, perfect. I don't know why I've done that, but anyway, it's just a bit easier to see for when we do stuff later on. Right, okay. So what I want to do is be flexible about the size of it. At the moment it's 64 by 64. Now it's a square tile, so I only need to really worry about one value, because if the width is going to be 32, the height will also be 32, otherwise you'll get a kind of stretching if that's a graphic. So where am I going to store that? Now I could store it on the object itself in the alterable values. I could do an alterable value saying size. But actually it's probably more useful because I will have other tiles and I'll have the player object as well, which we're not going to go over today, but everything's going to be relying on the size of this. We need somewhere kind of more central to making sure that this happens for a lot of different things, not just this tile. And so if I click on the frame and go in there, oh, not the frame, the global, whoops, got the wrong one. So if you click on the project at the top, and you'll notice there's actually global values. And so what I can do is add a new global value, double click on it, and grid size. And remember, I'm using camel case. It does allow spaces, but get into good habits early on. And what I'm going to say is I want that to be 128. So if I run it now, it doesn't care what I want, it's just going to keep it at 64 because I haven't done any programming. So what I want to do is I want to go into the back end, and we're going to have a new group, I think. If I click on the left hand side, insert group, and I'll call it tiles. Cool. Right, and what I'm going to say is at the start of frame, so right at the start of the game, I want this to conform to what I said a tile should, what size I said a tile should be. So if I right click and you go to scale and set scale. Now if I only wanted to change the horizontal size, I'd do this one, and the vertical size I would do this one, but since it's a tile, both the vertical and horizontal I want to increase. Okay, now this can get really confusing because you'd think, okay, 128 pixels. No, that's not how this works. It's about scale. So if I wanted to double its size, this would be a 2. If I want to halve this size, this will be a half. If I wanted to make something 10 times bigger, it would be a 10. So we've got to think about the maths. Well, what is it now? It's 64 at the moment. What do I want it to be? 128. Okay, so I wanted to figure out how I get from 64 to 128. Well, obviously I times it by 2. But if I type in a 2 here and then change that 128 to, I don't know, 32, it will not care whether I put a 32 there. It will just double it, because if I've written a 2 here, it'll always double it. So we need to come up with the answer of 2 using these two values. And the way of doing that is the size you want it to be divided by the size that it is. Now, if you want to be really precise with this, don't forget, if you want an answer that can be a decimal, you have to put a 0.0 after each of these values. I'm not ever going to pick a number that's not a kind of multiple or a factor of 64, because then you get weird kind of guessing of pixels. But that's what I'm going to put in. So have a think about it. 128 divided by 64 is 2. But if I wanted it 32, so if I put 32 up there, 32 divided by 64 is a half, and we wanted it half the size if we picked 32. Very complicated maths bit, but we can get over that. Now the next screen is about quality or speed. Basically, Clickteam is saying, look, do you want me to do this quickly or do you want me to do this right? I would always say maximum quality, but if you find that your level is not loading very well, then you might want to change that to 0 for some of them, especially like the far background objects, that it doesn't matter so much. Basically, this just means that when you enlarge something or shrink something, you've got to make a decision about what happens with all the pixels you're losing. So, for instance, if we went from 64 to 32, you're losing half the pixels. So you've got to kind of take a guess about what colour the new pixel that replaced 2 pixels has to be. And there's some really clever ways of doing it, and there's some very quick ways of doing it. So this is your choice. Do you want a clever way or do you want a quick way? Always the clever way, unless it's a problem later on. So let's have a look now. Perfect. And so there were 4 tiles here originally, because our player object was kind of 3 down and 2 across, and now there's just one big tile. So you'll notice as well is that single pixel line that we had around for the border is now 2 pixels. So let's test the versatility of this. Let's see if I change that to 32, which is half of 64, so it should be half the size. And it doesn't do it. Why? Because we didn't use the value. We hard coded this and we didn't refer to this. So let's refer to it. How do we refer to it? Well, where do we go for this? So retrieve global value. It's that simple. It's the third one, first item, third one down. That's how many times we're going to use this. But notice that there's only 26 letters of the alphabet, and so 26 of these global values. There is a solution to that, and you can make as many global actives as you want to store all this value, all this data. But for the beginner's course, this is actually a much better one to use. So grid size divided by 64. Now you might say, well, why is that hard coded? And actually you might have a point, because maybe we would want to store what the size of our graphic was up down here in case we want to make the graphic bigger or smaller. But really, when we're finishing up, we won't use this function. If it's 128, we will draw a graphic that's 128 by 128. This is only really for development, so we can try different tile sizes out and make changes down the line if we need to. Let's test that now, and hopefully that will be half the size, because it's now 32 pixels we want. And it's disappeared. So where's it gone? Let's have a look. Ooh, if I click on the frame, let's move it more central and let's see what's happened. Completely disappeared. Now, I know the answer to this. Took me a second of thought. It's exactly what I said before. That equals 0. Does not. That 32 divided by 64 equals 0. Why? Because we didn't put the decimal point in. If that appears anywhere in the calculation, the whole calculation, that's not quite true. If that appears in an operation, ignoring brackets and stuff down the line, if that appears in a calculation, which is, a calculation is something, do something, then it will give you a decimal, so it will give the 0.5. Amateur mistake. And there we are, it's half the size. So if you find that it's just disappearing if you halve the size, just make sure you've got that decimal. And that is something I'm doing all of the time. And I go, why isn't this working? And then you look back and it's just that one little decimal point. And it's a really good thing that it does that, because it actually makes the performance much better. But I mean, these days computers are so fast, and we're not exactly doing the next kind of Call of Duty or anything on this thing, so we could probably move beyond that. But sometimes some computer programmers have the philosophy of needing to be explicit with everything. So if you want decimals, you've got to ask for it, and this is kind of where this comes from. I hope this has been useful. We're actually going to start creating all the tiles using fast loops in the next couple of videos. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you want to see more from us, please click subscribe. We release videos every single weekday at 7 PM UK time. Thank you.